Patricia had been managing her type 2 diabetes for 6 years. She was not the kind of person who ignored her health. She tested her blood sugar every morning. She took her metformin without fail. She went to every appointment. She read every label. She gave up white bread, switched to brown rice, cut out desserts entirely. And still, her endocrinologist kept adjusting her medication upward. At her last visit, he told her that her A1C had climbed to 8.6, that her pancreas was working harder than it should, that if things didn't change in the next 6 months, they were going to talk about adding a second medication. Patricia drove home and cried in her car because she was doing everything right. She was following every piece of advice she had ever been given. And her blood sugar kept going in the wrong direction. What nobody had told Patricia, and what I want to tell you today, is that managing diabetes is not just about what you eat. It is about what those foods do to a specific biological process that most doctors never explain to their patients. And when Patricia finally understood that process and made 4 specific changes that I am going to walk you through today, her A1C dropped from 8.6 to 6.9 in 4 months. Not from a new medication, not from an extreme diet, from understanding a mechanism her doctor had never explained, and from 4 foods that directly targeted it. My name is Dr. Angela Moore, and today I want to give you the same information Patricia finally got. Because if your numbers are not moving the way they should, or if they are slowly creeping in the wrong direction despite your best efforts, there is a very good chance that nobody has explained to you what I am about to explain. Let us start with something that will change how you think about blood sugar forever. Most people, and honestly most general practitioners, think about diabetes as a sugar problem. You have too much sugar in your blood. The solution is to eat less sugar, take medication that lowers sugar, and monitor your sugar levels. That is not wrong, but it is incomplete. And that incompleteness is why so many people do everything they are told and still watch their numbers get worse. Here is what is actually happening. Your body regulates blood sugar through a hormone called insulin. When you eat and your blood sugar rises, your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin travels to your cells, your muscle cells, your fat cells, your liver cells, and it knocks on the door. It says, "Open up, take this glucose out of the blood, use it for energy or store it." In a healthy body, the cells open the door immediately. Glucose moves out of the blood and into the cells. Blood sugar returns to normal. In type 2 diabetes, the cells stop responding normally to insulin's signal. The door does not open as quickly. The pancreas panics and produces more insulin. The blood sugar stays elevated longer than it should. Over time, the pancreas gets exhausted from overproducing insulin. This is called insulin resistance, and it is the actual root of type 2 diabetes. Here is why this distinction matters enormously for what you eat and drink. Metformin, the most commonly prescribed diabetes medication, works primarily by suppressing your liver's glucose output. It tells your liver to stop releasing stored glucose into the bloodstream between meals. That is genuinely helpful. It reduces fasting blood sugar. But it doesn't fix insulin resistance at the cellular level. It doesn't repair the door. It just reduces some of the pressure behind it. The 4 foods I'm going to show you today do something different. They directly target the cellular machinery behind insulin resistance. They help fix the door. And when you combine that with your medication, the results can be dramatic, as Patricia discovered. But before we get to the 4 foods, we need to talk about something that is making insulin resistance worse in millions of diabetics who have absolutely no idea it is happening. There's a process happening in your body right now, if you have type 2 diabetes or prediabetes, that your doctor has almost certainly never sat down and explained to you. It is called chronic low-grade inflammation. Now, you have probably heard the word inflammation before. Most people associate it with a swollen ankle or a sore throat, acute inflammation, the kind you can see and feel. But chronic low-grade inflammation is different. It is silent. You cannot feel it. It does not show up on your basic blood panel unless your doctor specifically orders inflammatory markers. And it is one of the most powerful drivers of insulin resistance that exists. Here's how it works. Your immune cells produce signaling proteins called cytokines, specifically interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein. In small amounts, these are normal and necessary. But when they are chronically elevated due to excess body fat, poor sleep, processed food, or even just aging, They begin interfering directly with insulin's ability to communicate with your cells. Think of it this way. Insulin knocks on the door of your muscle cell. But inflammatory cytokines have been jamming the lock. The signal gets through weakly. The door opens slowly. Blood sugar stays elevated. This is why two people can eat the exact same meal and have completely different blood sugar responses. The person with higher inflammation has cells that are less responsive to insulin's signal. The same amount of food produces a higher and longer blood sugar spike. And here is the part that very few people understand. The foods that reduce this inflammation directly improve insulin sensitivity, not by reducing sugar, not by lowering carbohydrates, by fixing the lock that inflammatory cytokines have been jamming. 3 of the 4 foods I'm about to show you work through this exact pathway, and one of them does something even more direct, something that was confirmed in a peer-reviewed clinical trial and that changed the way researchers think about dietary intervention in diabetes. Let us get to them. Food number 4. Extra virgin olive oil. Let us start with the one that surprises people most, because most diabetics think of oil as something to minimize or avoid. Extra virgin olive oil, genuine cold-pressed high-quality extra virgin olive oil, is one of the most thoroughly researched anti-inflammatory foods in human nutrition. And its effects on insulin sensitivity are documented across dozens of randomized controlled trials. The active compound is oleocanthal, a polyphenol unique to olive oil that has been shown in peer-reviewed research to inhibit the same inflammatory enzymes as ibuprofen. This is not a loose analogy. Researchers at the Monell Chemical Senses Center, who first identified oleocanthal, noted that the throat irritation you feel from high-quality olive oil, that peppery burn at the back of your throat, is caused by the same mechanism as ibuprofen's anti-inflammatory action. This matters because of what chronic inflammation does to insulin signaling. When oleocanthal reduces inflammatory cytokine activity, insulin receptors on your muscle cells become more responsive. The door opens more easily. A landmark study followed participants on a Mediterranean diet enriched with extra virgin olive oil. After 4 years, not 4 weeks, 4 years, participants showed a 40% lower risk of developing type 2 diabetes compared to a low-fat diet group. Among those who already had diabetes, inflammatory markers dropped significantly, and insulin sensitivity improved measurably. But there is a purchasing trap here that most people fall into. The words extra virgin on a label do not guarantee quality. The olive oil market has a significant fraud problem. Studies have repeatedly found that many bottles sold as extra virgin in American supermarkets do not meet the chemical standards for that designation. They are refined oils with olive oil added, or oils that have oxidized during transport and storage. What you want is extra virgin olive oil with a harvest date, not just a best-by date, a harvest date on the label. You want it in a dark glass bottle, and you want it from a single source, not a blend. How much and how often? 2 tablespoons per day. Used as your primary cooking fat or as a dressing base. The heat question matters. Extra virgin olive oil is stable for light to medium heat cooking, up to around 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Beyond that, use refined avocado oil for cooking, and reserve your extra virgin for dressings and finishing. What kills the benefit? Refined olive oil, light olive oil, or anything labeled simply olive oil, without the extra virgin designation. These have had the polyphenols removed in the refining process. The anti-inflammatory benefit is almost entirely gone. Food number 3, leafy greens, specifically cooked spinach. You have heard that leafy greens are healthy. What you have probably not heard is the specific mechanism that makes cooked spinach particularly powerful for diabetics, and it has nothing to do with fiber. Spinach is one of the highest food sources of magnesium available. And magnesium is directly involved in insulin signaling in a way that most people and most doctors have never been told. Here is the mechanism. Insulin binding to your cell receptor triggers a cascade of molecular events. That cascade requires magnesium at multiple steps. Without adequate magnesium, the cascade fires incompletely. Insulin binds, but the signal is weak. The cell does not respond efficiently. Glucose stays in the blood. Research has found that magnesium deficiency is common in type 2 diabetics. Studies put the figure anywhere from roughly 1 in 4 to nearly half of all patients, depending on the population studied. And the relationship runs in both directions. Insulin resistance causes the kidneys to excrete more magnesium, which worsens insulin resistance, which causes more magnesium excretion. It is a cycle that quietly makes your diabetes worse over time. A meta-analysis published in Diabetes Care that pooled data from over 536,000 people found that higher dietary magnesium intake was associated with a significantly lower risk of type 2 diabetes. Among people who already had diabetes, magnesium supplementation in randomized trials improved fasting glucose and insulin sensitivity measurably. Why cooked spinach specifically? A cup of cooked spinach delivers approximately 157 milligrams of magnesium, about 37% of your daily target. That is far more than you would get from the same cup of raw spinach, because cooking shrinks spinach down dramatically. What looks like one modest cooked cup started out as roughly 6 cups of raw leaves. Cooking also breaks down some of the oxalic acid that can interfere with mineral absorption. So you are getting more magnesium packed into less food, and a meaningful share of it in a more usable form. The protocol: half a cup to 1 cup of cooked spinach, 3 to 5 times per week. Sauté it in your extra virgin olive oil. You are now activating 2 mechanisms simultaneously. The sulfur compounds in garlic have their own documented effects on blood sugar that I will come back to. The purchasing consideration: fresh or frozen, both work well. Frozen spinach is harvested at peak nutrition and flash frozen, making it nutritionally equivalent to fresh and often more affordable. Food number 2, fatty fish. Specifically wild salmon. The relationship between omega-3 fatty acids and inflammation is one of the more thoroughly documented areas in metabolic research. And researchers are increasingly looking at what that means for insulin resistance specifically. Most people think of fish oil as a heart health supplement. The effects on blood sugar and insulin sensitivity are less well known, and the research on that piece is still more mixed than the heart health research, which is worth saying plainly before we go further. Here's the mechanism. The omega-3 fatty acids EPA and DHA, found in high concentrations in fatty fish, do 2 things that are relevant for diabetics. First, they are potent anti-inflammatory compounds. They are incorporated into your cell membranes, where they compete with the pro-inflammatory omega-6 fatty acids that dominate most Western diets. When your cell membrane composition shifts toward omega-3 predominance, it becomes more fluid, and there's good evidence this supports better insulin signaling. Second, EPA and DHA activate a nuclear receptor called PPAR-gamma. This receptor acts as a regulator of glucose and fat metabolism. When PPAR-gamma is activated, your fat cells become more efficient at storing fatty acids, which reduces the free fatty acids circulating in your blood. Free fatty acids are linked to insulin resistance. They can interfere with insulin signaling in your muscle cells. Less free fatty acid burden is generally associated with better insulin response. Now, here's the honest picture on the clinical trials. Some meta-analyses of omega-3 supplementation in people with type 2 diabetes have found meaningful improvements in fasting glucose and insulin resistance markers. Others, including some of the larger and more rigorous reviews, have found little to no significant effect on blood sugar specifically, even while confirming clear benefits for triglycerides and inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein. So the anti-inflammatory and cardiovascular benefits of omega-3s are well established. The direct blood sugar benefit is promising and biologically plausible, but it is not as settled as some of what we have already covered, and I want to be straight with you about that, rather than overstate it. Why wild salmon over a supplement? Because wild salmon delivers EPA and DHA alongside astaxanthin, the pigment that gives wild salmon its natural pink color, which has its own antioxidant properties. Wild salmon also delivers high-quality protein, which slows gastric emptying and reduces post-meal blood sugar spikes on its own. And that piece, the protein effect on post-meal spikes, is well supported regardless of the omega-3 debate. The protocol: 3 to 4 ounces of wild salmon, 2 to 3 times per week. Baked or poached, not fried, which adds pro-inflammatory fats that work against the benefit. Canned wild Alaska salmon is a genuinely excellent and affordable option. The purchasing trap: farmed Atlantic salmon has a meaningfully different omega-3 to omega-6 ratio than wild salmon. Studies have found the ratio runs several times higher in omega-6 for farmed fish. And farmed salmon typically gets its color from added astaxanthin in the feed, rather than a wild diet. Look for wild or wild-caught Alaska on the label. Sockeye, coho, and pink salmon are all good choices. Atlantic salmon without the wild designation is almost always farmed. Food number 1. Cinnamon. Ceylon specifically, not cassia. This one surprises people most. There are 2 types of cinnamon sold in the United States. Cassia is what you find in every grocery store spice aisle, and it is what produced the mixed, inconsistent results in early diabetes research. Ceylon cinnamon is a different plant species, with a different chemical profile. Its compounds activate insulin receptors directly, triggering glucose uptake, even when insulin signaling is impaired. They also inhibit the intestinal enzyme that breaks complex carbohydrates into glucose, flattening the blood sugar curve after a meal. This is actually the same mechanism as the diabetes medication acarbose. And cinnamon slows gastric emptying, meaning glucose enters the bloodstream more gradually, and post-meal spikes are lower and shorter. A meta-analysis published in the Annals of Family Medicine found meaningful reductions in fasting blood glucose in diabetic patients who took cinnamon consistently. The protocol: half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon daily, sprinkled on oatmeal, stirred into plain Greek yogurt, added to a smoothie, or mixed into your morning coffee. Consistency matters more than quantity. Where to find it? Look for the words Ceylon cinnamon, true cinnamon, or Sri Lanka cinnamon on the label. It costs slightly more than cassia, usually around $6 to $9 for a 2-ounce jar. But a half teaspoon per day makes a jar last 2 to 3 months. The cinnamon in your regular spice aisle is almost certainly cassia. Use the right one. Let us come back to Patricia. When I reviewed what she was eating, a pattern emerged immediately. Every morning she drank fresh orange juice. No added sugar. Her doctor had never said anything about it. But juicing removes fiber. What remains is liquid sugar delivered to your liver faster than it can process it. The overflow becomes liver fat. Liver fat triggers insulin resistance. Her blood sugar was spiking every morning before she had eaten a single solid food. At lunch, she added dried cranberries to her salad. A quarter cup contains nearly 25 grams of concentrated sugar. She thought it was her healthiest meal. At dinner, white rice in small portions. Her handout said that was fine. None of these were foods she had been told to avoid. Here is what she changed. Orange juice out, water and avocado in. Dried cranberries out, fresh blueberries in. White rice out, quinoa or sweet potato in. She added olive oil daily. Cooked spinach 3 times a week. Wild salmon twice a week. And Ceylon cinnamon every morning. No new medication, no new diet, no new exercise. 4 months later, her A1C moved from 8.6 to 6.9. Her endocrinologist asked what she had changed. When she told him, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said he was going to look up the research. Here is exactly what to do, starting today. Every morning, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon in yogurt or oatmeal, before any carbs. 3 to 5 mornings a week, half a cup of blueberries, eaten whole. 3 to 5 times a week, half a cup of cooked spinach, sautéed in olive oil. 2 to 3 times a week, 3 to 4 ounces of wild salmon, baked or poached. Daily, 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil as your primary fat. Eliminate immediately fruit juice, dried fruit, and white rice eaten alone. Check your fasting blood sugar today. That is your baseline. Give it 6 weeks before you judge it. These pathways need consistent exposure to produce measurable change. And if you're on metformin, these foods work alongside it, not against it. Patricia is not an exceptional case. This happens to thousands of people doing their best with incomplete information. They follow the handout, take their medication, eat what they're told is safe, and watch their numbers climb anyway, because nobody explained what was actually driving their insulin resistance. These 4 foods, extra virgin olive oil, cooked spinach, wild salmon, and Ceylon cinnamon, are not miracle cures. They're affordable, available at your grocery store, and they work alongside whatever treatment plan your doctor has already put you on. If Patricia's story resonates with you, leave me a comment. Tell me which food surprised you most. If you want to know why your fasting number is elevated even when you ate well all day, I've covered that in another video. Link in the description. Take care of yourself. You deserve complete information. This is Wellness Food Blog.